If you beat me with that piece of junk, I'll give you my company. The CEO laughed, her voice cutting through the parking lot loud enough for everyone to hear. Victoria Hastings, 42, pointed to a rusty 1995 Honda Civic with faded paint and a rear bumper held together with duct tape. Next to it, her silver Mercedes-AMG GT gleamed in the midday sun, worth more than the combined annual salaries of 10 employees. Across the parking lot, Rosa Washington, 38, a mechanic at the corporate building's repair shop, stood holding the Civic's keys in her grease-stained hands. Her navy blue uniform with her name embroidered on the pocket was stained with motor oil. Her curly hair was tied back in a simple ponytail. Her eyes were tired from working double shifts for 5 years to support her 2 children on her own. About 40 employees stopped in the Hastings Technologies parking lot, forming a semicircle. Cell phones were raised. Some were laughing. Others were uncomfortable but didn't have the courage to intervene. "You heard me right," Victoria continued, circling the Civic like a predator studying its prey. "That pile of rust against my AMG. Full lap race in the parking lot. If you win, I'll sign the papers transferring the company to you on the spot." Rosa didn't respond immediately. She just looked at Victoria with an expression that wasn't fear. It was something closer to calculation. It had all started 10 minutes earlier. Rosa was changing the oil in the executive's car when Victoria arrived for a meeting with important investors. The CEO's reserved parking space was occupied by a delivery truck blocking the entrance. The only available space was next to Rosa's Civic. Victoria got out of the Mercedes, looked at the old Civic as if it were trash on the sidewalk, and said loudly enough for the group of executives to hear, "Who let this piece of junk park here? It devalues the entire building." Rosa was putting away tools when she heard the comment. "It's my car," she said calmly, wiping her hands on a rag. "All the other spots were taken." Victoria turned, looking Rosa up and down with disdain that made Rosa's blood boil. "Of course it's yours. It suits you perfectly." She made a dramatic gesture. "You know what irritates me? People who have no ambition. Who are content with mediocrity and then complain that life is unfair." One of the executives whispered something to his colleague. Cell phones began to record. Rosa took a deep breath, controlling the anger that threatened to explode. 5 years working in that building. 5 years listening to comments about her place, about being just a mechanic, about not belonging in that world of expensive suits and meetings in glass-walled rooms. "My car works," Rosa said, her voice firm. "It's all I need. It works." Victoria laughed, a cruel sound that echoed through the parking lot. "Honey, that can hardly be called a car. It's humiliation on wheels." That's when the investor next to Victoria, a 50-year-old man in a $5,000 suit, made a suggestion that would change everything. "Why don't you prove your point, Victoria? Race her. Show the difference between mediocrity and excellence." Victoria loved the idea instantly. A chance to publicly humiliate someone while impressing investors? Perfect. "You know what?" Victoria smiled predatorily. "Let's make this interesting. If that piece of junk beats my Mercedes, I'll sign the company over to you. The entire Hastings Technologies. $340 million in market value." Employees gasped. Someone muttered, "Is she crazy?" "But when I win," Victoria continued, "you resign. In front of everyone. And you publicly admit that people like you will never get anywhere." A heavy silence fell over the parking lot. Cell phones recorded every second. Rosa felt the weight of 40 pairs of eyes on her. What Victoria didn't know, what no one there knew, was that Rosa Washington wasn't just a mechanic. 10 years ago, she had been a promising mechanical engineer at Ford, working on high-performance engine design. Until an abusive husband destroyed her career, isolated her from friends and family, and left her with 2 small children and 0 resources when she finally managed to escape. The 1995 Civic that Victoria mocked? Rosa had rebuilt it completely on her own. The engine wasn't original. The suspension wasn't factory-made. That piece of junk had surprises Victoria's Mercedes would never see coming. But Rosa didn't say any of that. She just looked at Victoria for 3 long seconds and then nodded once. "All right." Victoria blinked, surprised to find no resistance. "Really? You accept?" "You offered a race," Rosa said calmly, opening the Civic door. "Let's race." Employees began to murmur excitedly. Investors exchanged interested glances. Someone shouted, "This is going to be epic." Victoria slid into the Mercedes, starting the engine, which roared with the sound of $150,000 in German engineering. Rosa got into the Civic, which started with a modest, almost tame sound. The facility supervisor, a 55-year-old man who had known Rosa for 5 years and had always respected her, approached her window. "Rosa, you don't have to do this. She's humiliating you on purpose." Rosa looked at him with a small smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I know exactly what she's doing." "Then why accept it?" "Because sometimes," Rosa said softly, "people need to learn lessons that only humiliation can teach." The supervisor frowned, confused by her tone. There was something about Rosa, her calmness, her confidence, that didn't fit the situation. It was as if she knew something that everyone else was unaware of. Victoria honked impatiently. "Let's get this over with. I have a meeting in 20 minutes. The route was set, a complete lap around the parking lot, circling the building. Approximately 800 meters. The operations manager stood at the makeshift starting line, arm raised. Rosa adjusted the rearview mirror, took a deep breath, and placed her hand on the gearshift with the familiarity of someone who knew every screw in that car. Victoria waved through the window, smiling confidently. In her head, she was already planning how to use viral video for company marketing. Powerful CEO putting employee in her place? Investors would love it. 3, 2, 1. Go. If you're enjoying this story about a woman who everyone underestimated but who carries secrets capable of completely turning the tables, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what happens in the next few meters will prove that judging a book by its cover is the most expensive mistake any CEO can make. Victoria's Mercedes exploded from the starting line with a roar that made several employees cover their ears. Tires screeched against the asphalt, leaving black rubber marks. The car accelerated like a silver missile, the rear end lowering with the force of the torque as Victoria pressed the accelerator to the floor. Rosa's Civic left the line with an almost polite sound in comparison. No drama. No smoke. Just smooth, controlled movement. Employees burst out laughing. "She's not even trying," someone shouted. Another said, "Poor thing, the car can barely accelerate." Victoria glanced in the rearview mirror, seeing the Civic quickly falling behind, and smiled with satisfaction. Just as she had imagined. In 10 seconds, she had a 4-car-length lead. The Mercedes devoured the asphalt, its V8 engine singing the song of absolute domination. But Rosa didn't seem concerned. She maintained a steady speed, her eyes focused not on Victoria, but on something ahead. Her hands were steady on the wheel. Her breathing was calm. It was as if she were just driving home after a day at work. The first curve came quickly, a 90-degree turn around the corner of the building. Victoria entered confidently, stepping on the brakes just enough to maintain control. The Mercedes obeyed perfectly, its adaptive suspension system adjusting in milliseconds. Rosa entered the same curve 5 seconds later. But something strange happened. The Civic didn't slow down as much as it should have. It didn't skid. It just flowed through the curve with surgical precision, a perfect line, as if it were on rails. The supervisor watching frowned. "That car shouldn't do that." The investor next to him nodded. "The suspension is different. Very different." But Victoria didn't notice. She was too busy savoring her anticipated victory, already planning the exact words she would use when Rosa resigned. The next straight stretched for 200 meters along the side of the building. Victoria accelerated hard again, the speedometer rising rapidly. 50 miles per hour. 60. 75. The wind whistled through the windows. Adrenaline pumped. Behind her, the Civic kept a steady distance. Not gaining ground, but not losing any either. Rosa shifted gears with mathematical precision, each movement deliberate. The Civic's engine didn't roar. It just hummed, a constant, confident sound. Something was different about the car's behavior, but cell phone cameras were too far away to capture the details. And Victoria was too busy enjoying the lead to question it. The second curve approached, tighter than the first. Victoria stepped on the brakes harder this time, feeling the weight of the Mercedes shift forward. The tires protested slightly, but the car held its line. Rosa entered the same curve seconds later. And again, the Civic did something impossible for a car of that age and appearance. Not only did it maintain its speed, it practically danced through the curve, the rear end slipping slightly but Rosa correcting it with such a smooth touch on the steering wheel that it seemed instinctive. "Wait," said an employee in the crowd, zooming in on the Civic with his cell phone. "That car has four-wheel disc brakes. The 1995 Civic didn't come with that." A colleague next to him replied, "And look at the suspension. It's very low. Very stiff. Someone has heavily modified that car." But these observations were lost in the general noise of the crowd cheering for Victoria. CEO versus mechanics. Power versus poverty. The outcome seemed inevitable. The backstraight was shorter, only 100 meters, but it had a speed bump in the middle, installed months ago after a delivery driver almost ran over an employee. Victoria saw the speed bump and slowed down significantly, not wanting to damage the Mercedes' low suspension. The car went over it with an uncomfortable but controlled jolt. Rosa maintained her speed. The Civic hit the speed bump at a perfect angle, the suspension absorbing the impact as if it had been designed specifically for that purpose. The car didn't even sway. It just kept going, gaining 2 precious seconds. Victoria looked in the rearview mirror and frowned. How the hell? For the first time, a small seed of doubt planted itself in her mind. That car wasn't acting as it should. And Rosa wasn't driving as a nervous amateur should drive. But pride is a powerful poison. Instead of questioning, Victoria pressed the accelerator harder. The Mercedes responded instantly, accelerating again. She wouldn't lose to a junker driven by a mechanic. Impossible. The final stretch stretched out ahead, 250 meters straight to the makeshift finish line where officials waited. Victoria was still 3 lengths ahead. Victory seemed assured. That's when the third curve appeared, tighter than all the others. Designed to force low speed. Victoria stepped on the brakes, feeling the ABS system pulse under her foot as her speed dropped rapidly. Rosa also braked. But unlike Victoria, she did something else. Something that made 2 mechanics in the crowd gasp in recognition. She stepped on the clutch, pulled the handbrake for a fraction of a second while turning the steering wheel abruptly, and let the rear of the Civic slide in a perfect controlled arc. A technique called handbrake drift, a maneuver that required perfect timing, intimate knowledge of the car, and the courage to trust physics when every instinct screamed to let go of the steering wheel. The Civic spun around the curve like an ice skater, Rosa correcting with minimal movements of the steering wheel. The car lost almost no speed on the curve. In fact, it came out of it pointing perfectly toward the final stretch, the engine already accelerating before the front wheels were even completely aligned. The crowd exploded. "She did a drift," someone shouted. Cell phones focused on the Civic, now closing the gap between it and the Mercedes at frightening speed. Victoria came out of the curve 3 seconds later, but those 3 seconds were costly. The Civic was now only a length behind. And gaining. "No," Victoria muttered, pressing the accelerator to the floor. "No, no, no." The Mercedes responded with everything it had. The V8 engine roared with fury. The speedometer climbed. 90. 100. 110. But the Civic didn't stop gaining ground. Rosa shifted into top gear, and for the first time, the engine of that old car showed what it was really made of. The sound changed from a gentle hum to a surprised roar. It wasn't a factory engine. It was something much, much more powerful. Halfway to the finish line. Mercedes, 115 kilometers per hour. Civic, 120 kilometers per hour. Victoria looked in the rearview mirror, seeing the Civic now right behind her, and felt for the first time in years something she had forgotten what it was like, fear of losing. "Come on, come on, come on," she shouted at the car, as if shouting could make a difference. The Civic pulled to the side, coming up parallel to the Mercedes. Rosa glanced briefly at Victoria through the windows. She didn't smile. She didn't taunt. She just looked at her with the same calm expression as always. And that calm was more terrifying than any gesture of triumph. 100 meters to the finish line. Cars side by side. Crowd going wild. Cell phones capturing everything. 50 meters. The Civic began to pull slightly ahead. Half a length. 1 length. 25 meters. Victoria slammed the steering wheel, frustration exploding. Mercedes gave it everything she had, but it wasn't enough. Rosa's Civic crossed the finish line first. By 2 full car lengths. Absolute silence fell over the parking lot for 3 surreal seconds. Then an explosion. Screams. Employees jumping up and down. Investors gaping. Cell phones recording the look of pure shock on Victoria's face. Rosa slowed down gently, made a smooth turn, and parked the Civic exactly where it had been before. She turned off the engine with a simple turn of the key. She took one deep breath. Then she got out of the car. Victoria stopped the Mercedes abruptly, stumbled out slightly, her face red. That's not possible. You cheated. You must have modified that car illegally. Modifying my own car is not illegal, Rosa interrupted, her voice still calm but now carrying authority. It's called maintenance. And skill. The investor who had suggested the race approached, looking at the Civic with renewed respect. That's not the original engine, is it? No, Rosa admitted. It's AB18C5 from an Integra Type R. 195 horsepower. I installed it myself. Victoria shook her head, refusing to accept it. It doesn't matter. It was a ridiculous bet. Obviously, I'm not going to transfer the company for. You said it in front of 40 witnesses, Rosa cut in, pointing to the crowd. It was all recorded. If I win, I'll sign the company over to you. Your exact words. It was a joke. It didn't seem like a joke when you forced me to accept public dismissal if I lost. Rosa took a step forward. The rules don't change just because you lost. Victoria looked around, seeing the faces of employees, investors, everyone watching. Some recording. Panic began to replace anger in her eyes. Victoria took a step back, looking at investors watching the scene with unreadable expressions. You're not taking this seriously, are you? It was a stupid bet, made in the heat of the moment. Made in front of witnesses, the lead investor cut in, adjusting his glasses. Recorded on at least 20 cell phones. And broadcast live by 3 different employees on social media. Victoria felt the blood drain from her face. Broadcast live. The hashtag is already trending, said the marketing employee, checking her phone. Hashtag CEO's janitor. 2.3 million views in the last 15 minutes. Mechanic, Rosa corrected calmly. I'm a mechanic, not a janitor. Victoria ignored the correction, her mind racing through options. Lawyers. She needed lawyers. A verbal agreement was not binding. She could claim coercion, public embarrassment, anything. I will not honor a ridiculous agreement based on. Then let me make a counteroffer, Rosa interrupted, surprising everyone. I don't want your company. A confused silence fell over the group. Victoria blinked. What? I said I don't want the company, Rosa repeated. I have no interest in running Hastings Technologies. But you made a public bet and you lost. So here's what I want, a complete audit of the company's labor practices. Independent. No interference from you. Investors exchanged interested glances. Victoria frowned. Why on earth would you want that? Because I've worked here for 5 years, Rosa said, her voice gaining strength. And I've seen things. Maintenance workers working without adequate benefits. Mechanics without proper safety equipment. Below market wages while you receive $2 million bonuses. That's documented, Rosa finished, pulling a crumpled envelope from her uniform pocket. I have a list. Names, dates, specific violations. I've been collecting it for 2 years. I was waiting for the right moment to use it. Victoria stared at the envelope as if it were a poisonous snake. You were investigating me. I was protecting co-workers, Rosa corrected. Because someone needed to. That's when Michael Chun, the lead investor, stepped forward. A 52-year-old man, he was a venture capital veteran who had seen dozens of companies rise and fall. Miss Washington, may I see that documentation? Rosa handed him the envelope. Michael quickly leafed through the papers, his expression growing more serious with each page. This is extensive and well documented. I worked in HR before becoming a mechanic, Rosa explained. I know what to look for and how to document it properly. Victoria felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be happening. Obviously we need to verify these allegations, Michael said, still reading. But if half of this is accurate, we have a serious corporate governance problem. Another investor, a 48-year-old woman named Patricia Moore, approached. Victoria, is this true? Maintenance workers without proper safety equipment. I don't micromanage day-to-day operations. You're the CEO, Patricia cut in. It's literally your job to know. I can confirm some of these allegations, a voice from behind the crowd said. The facilities supervisor, the one who had alerted Rosa before the race, stepped forward. I requested updated safety equipment 6 times in the last year. All requests denied due to budget constraints. Budget constraints, Rosa repeated with bitter irony, while the CEO receives a $150,000 Mercedes as a performance bonus. Employees began to murmur among themselves. Some nodded. Others pulled out their phones, checking details Rosa had mentioned. Victoria felt control of the situation slipping completely through her fingers. You don't understand the pressures of running a company this size. I understand perfectly, Rosa interrupted. I worked as a mechanical engineer at Ford for 5 years before I had to start over. I know exactly how much safety equipment costs. I know exactly how much you save by cutting corners. And I know exactly how much it costs in lives when something goes wrong. You worked at Ford? Michael asked, genuine interest in his voice. High-performance engine design department, Rosa confirmed. 2005 to 2010. I worked on the EcoBoost V6 twin-turbo engine project, before personal circumstances forced me to leave the field. Employees looked at Rosa with surprise. Investors exchanged meaningful glances. Victoria felt the whole narrative turning against her. Why didn't you mention that when you applied for the mechanic position? Patricia asked. Because when you're a 33-year-old black woman with a 3-year gap in your employment history and 2 small children, you take whatever job you can get, Rosa replied simply. And you don't complain. And you certainly don't brag about credentials that no one is going to believe anyway. An uncomfortable silence followed these words. Several employees lowered their eyes, guilt evident in their expressions. Michael closed the envelope and looked directly at Victoria. We need to talk. Now. In private. There's nothing to. Victoria, Patricia said, her voice cold. You just lost a public race against an employee you humiliated. That employee apparently has documentation of multiple labor violations. And 2.3 million people watched you make a bet that you now refuse to honor. As an investor controlling 23% of the company, I am formally requesting an emergency board meeting. Victoria looked around, seeing all her escape routes closing one by one. You can't. We can, Michael confirmed. And we will. Rosa, can you come with us? I'll need details about these allegations. Rosa nodded, but before following the investors, she turned to the crowd of employees. Anyone who wants to add their own documentation of labor issues, please email it to me by tomorrow. Auto Repair Shop, extension 4472. Everything will be included in the official audit. Excited murmurs rippled through the crowd. Employees pulled out their phones, some already typing furiously. Victoria watched, horror growing, as years of careful control crumbled in a matter of minutes. All because of mechanics she had thought insignificant. All because she had underestimated a woman in a grease-stained uniform. This isn't over, Victoria whispered to Rosa as she passed by. Rosa stopped, looked her straight in the eye, and said calmly, "You're right. It's just beginning." 3 hours later, Rosa was sitting in a 10th-floor conference room, a place she had never been before, while Michael and Patricia reviewed documentation. An open notebook on the table showed the detailed spreadsheet Rosa had kept for 2 years. "Impressive," Michael murmured, scrolling through the entries. "You documented every incident with the date, witness, photographic evidence. This is the work of a professional investigator." "It's the work of someone tired of seeing colleagues hurt because the company decides that safety is too expensive," Rosa replied. Patricia looked up. "Why wait 2 years? Why not take it to the board sooner?" "Because who's going to believe a mechanic against a billionaire CEO?" Rosa asked simply. I needed irrefutable evidence. And the right moment. Today gave me both. Michael leaned back in his chair, studying Rosa with new respect. You planned this. The race. You knew she would make that bet. I didn't know exactly what she would do, Rosa admitted. But I knew her type. People like Victoria can't resist the opportunity to humiliate those they consider inferior. Especially with an audience. And your car? Patricia asked. The modified engine wasn't an accident. No, Rosa confirmed. I spent the last year and a half rebuilding that Civic. Type R engine, adjustable coilover suspension, Brembo brakes, limited slip differential. Every part installed by me. Every weekend. Every night after work. Why? Michael asked, genuinely curious. Rosa was silent for a moment, staring at her grease-stained hands. Because sometimes when you lose control of your whole life, when someone takes everything from you, your career, your confidence, your sense of worth, you need to build something. Something that is completely yours. Something that proves you still have skills. That you still matter. She looked up, tears threatening but not falling. That car was a way to remind myself that I'm more than the uniform I wear. That I'm an engineer who deserved to be at Ford. That I'm a mother who deserves to give her children a better life. Patricia cleared her own throat, clearly moved. Michael nodded slowly. And today, Rosa continued, her voice steady again, when Victoria pointed to that car and called it junk, she wasn't just insulting metal and rubber. She was insulting years of work. Years of rebuilding. Years of proving to myself that I still have value. So you destroyed it, Michael said, not as an accusation but as an observation. I showed her that appearances can be deceiving, Rosa corrected. And that underestimating people based on the uniforms they wear is a costly mistake. Patricia closed her notebook. Rosa, I'll be blunt. This documentation is enough to force serious changes. Possibly Victoria's removal from the CEO position. What do you want to happen? Rosa thought carefully before answering. I want employees to have adequate safety equipment. I want salaries to be competitive. I want benefits to be fair. And I want everyone, no matter what their position, to be treated with basic respect. And Victoria? Victoria needs to learn that being CEO doesn't mean being a tyrant, Rosa said. If she can learn that and change, great. If she can't, then yes, she needs to go. Michael and Patricia exchanged glances. Some silent communication passed between them. The board meeting is tomorrow at 9 a.m., Michael finally said. You'll need to present evidence formally. Are you prepared? Rosa thought of children at home, waiting for a mother who worked double shifts to give them a better life. She thought of co-workers who deserved security. She thought of years spent rebuilding not just her car, but herself. I am, she said. I always have been. The board meeting room on the 20th floor was everything Rosa had never been invited to see. Glass walls overlooking the city, a 10-meter mahogany table, Italian leather chairs. 7 board members seated, all in suits that cost more than 2 months of her salary. Victoria was at the head of the table, defensive posture, legal counsel at her side. When Rosa entered wearing her mechanic's uniform, clean but still a uniform, Victoria couldn't hide her expression of disdain. Do we really need to have this ridiculous meeting? Victoria began before anyone sat down. The bet was a joke. No rational person. 2.8 million views now, Patricia interrupted, placing her tablet on the table and showing the view counter. Trending #1 on Twitter for 16 hours. CNN called wanting an interview. It's not a joke anymore, Victoria. It's a public relations crisis. Michael motioned for Rosa to sit down. Miss Washington, please present your documentation to the board. Rosa connected her laptop to the projector. The first screen appeared, a detailed spreadsheet with 127 entries. Each line was a documented incident. Date, location, description, witnesses, photos. Over the past 2 years, Rosa began, her voice steady despite her nervousness, I have documented systematic violations of workplace safety and unfair practices at Hastings Technologies. She clicked to the next slide. Photo of a fire extinguisher that expired 3 years ago. Safety equipment not updated despite multiple requests. Next slide. Photo of an employee wearing a makeshift cloth mask because proper masks were not provided. Inadequate protective equipment when working with chemicals. Next slide. Salary comparison. Hastings mechanics versus industry average. Difference of 23%. That's, Victoria began. Documented with pay stubs, job offers from competitors, and industry salary tables, Rosa continued without pause. Page 12 of the report. Next slide. Internal email Rosa had obtained from a sympathetic HR employee. Victoria instructing the department to minimize operating costs by cutting non-essential expenses. List included safety equipment and training. Where did you get this? Victoria demanded, standing up. That's confidential email. Sent to 15 people, Rosa replied. 3 of whom sent me copies anonymously because they were concerned about their colleagues' safety. Board member Harold Peterson, a 65-year-old man who had founded the company with Victoria 15 years ago, frowned. Victoria, did you really cut the safety budget? I didn't cut it. I optimized resource allocation. You cut it in half, Rosa interrupted, showing the next slide with budget figures for 3 consecutive years. 2022, $180,000 for security. 2023, $140,000. 2024, $90,000. Meanwhile, the marketing budget increased by 340%. Patricia furiously took notes. Michael watched Victoria with an increasingly cold expression. But the most important statistic, Rosa said, her voice gaining emotional intensity for the first time, is this. Next slide. Photo of a 50-year-old man with his arm in a cast. James Miller, senior mechanic. Arm broken when faulty lifting equipment failed. Requests for equipment maintenance denied for 6 consecutive months due to budget constraints. Next photo. 40-year-old woman with a scar on her face. Teresa Gonzalez, HVAC technician. Second-degree chemical burn because she did not have adequate protective equipment. Spent 2 weeks in the hospital. Received 0 days of paid sick leave. Next photo. 26-year-old man. Daniel Park. Died 8 months ago. The room froze. Everyone stared at the screen. 6-meter fall when safety system failed during roof maintenance, Rosa continued, her voice breaking slightly. Equipment was 3 years past its expiration date. It had been reported as unsafe 4 times. All replacement requests denied. That was investigated, Victoria said quickly, her face pale. It was an accident. OSHA found nothing because someone in this company paid $50,000 to make the problem go away, Rosa interrupted, showing the next slide. Bank transfer. Recipient, law firm specializing in labor liability mitigation. How did you, Victoria began, then stopped, realizing she was incriminating herself. Daniel's family received $100,000 in a humanitarian settlement, Rosa said. His life was valued at $100,000. While you, Victoria, received a $2.1 million bonus that same year. Harold closed his eyes, a look of pain on his face. Victoria, tell me this isn't true. Victoria opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Speechless. For the first time in her career, completely defenseless. I have more, Rosa said, but her voice was now pure controlled rage. 17 cases of harassment reported to HR in the last 3 years. 0 action taken. 6 employees resigned after reporting. All replaced by men who received 15% higher salaries for the same positions. She quickly advanced through the slides. Photo after photo. Document after document. 2 years of meticulously collected evidence. And you know what's worse? Rosa asked, looking directly at Victoria. You knew. You received monthly reports from HR. You signed budgets. You approved cuts. You saw the numbers. You saw the names. And you chose profits over people. Every single time. I had a fiduciary responsibility to shareholders, Victoria tried. You had a legal responsibility to employees. Rosa exploded, slamming her hand on the table. The first time she lost her composure. Daniel Park had 2 children. Teresa Gonzalez was left with permanent scarring. James Miller lost 40% of the function of his arm and can no longer work as a mechanic. Tears streamed down Rosa's face now, but her voice remained strong. And when I ran into you yesterday, when you pointed at my car and called it junk, when you laughed at me in front of everyone, you weren't just insulting me. You were insulting every person in this company that you treat as disposable. As if we don't matter. As if we're just numbers on a spreadsheet to be optimized. There was absolute silence in the room. Even Victoria had no response. Michael was the first to speak. Motion for immediate vote, removal of Victoria Hastings from the position of CEO, effective immediately, based on gross negligence of fiduciary duties and creation of a hostile and unsafe work environment. Second, Patricia said instantly. Wait, Victoria began to protest, but Harold cut her off. All in favor? 6 hands went up. Only Victoria voted against. Motion carried, Harold said, his voice heavy with disappointment. Victoria, you have until the end of the day to clear out your office. Security will escort you. Victoria looked around the table, seeing faces that had once smiled at her now avoiding her gaze. You can't do this. I built this company. You tarnished this company, Harold corrected. And you put lives at risk for greed. Get out, Victoria. Before I call security. Victoria grabbed her purse with trembling hands, shot Rosa a look of pure hatred, and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. After she left, Harold turned to Rosa. Miss Washington, on behalf of the board, I deeply apologize for what you've been through. And for what you've witnessed. Apologies won't bring Daniel back, Rosa said calmly. Apologies won't heal Teresa's scar. What I need to know is, what will change? Everything, Patricia replied firmly. First action, immediate investment of $5 million in upgrading security equipment at all facilities. Second, Michael continued, complete review of the salary structure. Any unjustifiable disparities will be corrected retroactively. Third, Harold added, Daniel Park's family will receive appropriate additional compensation. And a public apology. Fourth, Patricia said, we want to create a new position, Director of Employee Safety and Well-Being Operations. Reporting directly to the board. Starting salary $150,000. Rosa blinked. Why are you telling me this? Because, Michael said, a small smile appearing, we're offering you the position. Rosa froze completely. What? You've spent 2 years documenting problems we've ignored, Harold explained. You have an engineering background. You clearly care about the safety of your colleagues. And you just gave the most compelling presentation I've seen in 30 years on corporate boards. I'm a mechanic. You're an engineer who worked at Ford, Patricia corrected. Who rebuilt a high-performance engine single-handedly. Who organized a 2-year investigation while working double shifts. You're exactly who we need. Rosa looked at her grease-stained hands, then at the faces around the table. My children. Flexible hours, Michael offered. Remote work when necessary. Full health insurance for the whole family. And subsidized on-site daycare. Tears returned to Rosa's eyes. But this time, they weren't from anger. I need to think. Of course, Harold said gently. But Rosa? Thank you. For not giving up. For documenting everything. For caring when it would have been easier to just accept it. Rosa nodded, not trusting her voice. She grabbed her laptop and left the room. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall, breathing deeply. 2 years. 2 years collecting evidence. Waiting for the right moment. And in less than 24 hours, everything had changed. Her cell phone vibrated. A message from her 12-year-old son, Mom, you're on TV. My friends say you're a hero. Rosa smiled through her tears. Maybe she was. 6 months later, Rosa Washington adjusted her navy blue blazer, the first professional outfit she had bought in 8 years, and entered the main auditorium at Hastings Technologies. 300 people filled the space, employees from all divisions, from janitors to executives, gathered for something that had never happened before in the company's history. An open employee assembly. No hierarchies. No fear of retaliation. Just honest conversation about how to make the company better. Michael Chun, now interim CEO, opened the meeting. 6 months ago, this company nearly collapsed. Not because of market failure or competition. Because of moral failure. Because we forgot that business is made by people, not numbers. He gestured to Rosa in the front row. One person forced us to remember. Rosa Washington, our new Director of Safety and Well-being Operations, will present the changes that have been implemented and the next steps. Rosa took the stage, still not completely comfortable with the attention, but her voice was steady as she began to speak. 6 months ago, I ran against a woman who thought she could humiliate me. Who thought that an old car meant a worthless person. Who thought that a mechanic's uniform meant a mind without capacity. She paused, looking out at the audience. She was wrong. And today I want to tell you what we've changed to ensure that no one else is judged by appearances rather than abilities. The first slide appeared behind her. A $5 million investment in safety equipment. Fully implemented. Every fire extinguisher updated. Every lifting system certified. Every pair of safety glasses, every mask, every item that employees have been asking for years, now available. Moderate applause. Rosa continued. Complete salary review. 47 employees received retroactive raises totaling $890,000. Gender disparities eliminated in all positions. And we established a new policy: any employee can request an anonymous salary review at any time. Louder applause. Daniel Park's family received full compensation of $2.5 million. Not because we had to. Because it was the right thing to do. And we established a $10 million Daniel Park Memorial Fund for the college education of employees' children. Several employees wiped away tears. Teresa Gonzalez, the woman with the scar that Rosa had mentioned, was in the third row crying openly. And finally, Rosa said, her voice gaining emotion, we created an anonymous hotline to report problems. Zero retaliation. Investigation guaranteed within 48 hours. Because you shouldn't be afraid to speak up when something is wrong. Standing ovation. Rosa waited for the silence to return before continuing. But I want to be clear about something. These changes didn't happen because I'm special. They happened because I documented. Because I kept evidence. Because I refused to accept that that's just the way things are was an acceptable answer. She looked directly at the cameras in the back. The meeting was being broadcast live to all branches. If you see something wrong in your work, document it. If you see someone being treated unfairly, speak up. If you see danger being ignored, report it. Because change doesn't come from waiting for others to act. It comes from each person deciding that they will no longer remain silent. After the meeting, Rosa returned to her office, a small space on the 5th floor, but with a window and a door with her name on it. It still felt surreal. There was a knock on the door. Teresa Gonzalez entered, holding an envelope. I came to thank you, Teresa said, her voice breaking. For everything. For seeing me when no one else did. For caring when I was about to give up. Rosa stood up and hugged Teresa. You don't have to thank me for treating you like a human being should be treated. But I do, Teresa insisted. Because you risked everything. Your job, your safety, your reputation. For people like me. For people like us, Rosa corrected gently. Because 6 months ago, I was invisible too. I was also being treated as if I didn't matter. Teresa smiled through her tears, placed the envelope on the table, and left. Rosa opened it. Inside was a handmade card signed by 127 employees, every person she had documented as being harmed. Thank you for seeing us, was written at the top. Rosa carefully stored the card in a drawer next to a photo of her 2 children. Reminders of why she did all this. 3 months later, Victoria Hastings appeared in an interview on the evening news. Her hair was still perfect, her makeup flawless, but something was different. Her eyes held less arrogance. More weariness. I lost everything, Victoria admitted when the interviewer asked about her life after Hastings. The company I built. The reputation that took 15 years to create. The respect of my peers. Do you blame Rosa Washington? Victoria was silent for a long moment. No. I blame myself. Rosa did what any decent person would do, she protected her coworkers. I did the opposite. I put profits above people. And I paid the price for it. You tried to sue to regain your position. I tried, Victoria admitted. And I lost. Because the evidence was irrefutable. Because the jury heard about Daniel Park and Teresa Gonzalez and all the others I hurt through negligence. And because I was wrong. The interviewer leaned forward. What did you learn? Victoria looked directly at the camera. That being powerful doesn't mean crushing people who are weaker. It means using power to lift them up. That a $150,000 car doesn't make you better than someone driving a 1995 Civic. And that a woman in a mechanic's uniform can be more skilled, more intelligent, and infinitely more courageous than a CEO in a corner office. She paused, tears welling up. If Rosa Washington is watching, I'm sorry. Truly. You tried to teach me with dignity. I learned with humiliation. But I learned. Rosa watched the clip on her phone that night, sitting in the small kitchen of her apartment in the Bronx. The same apartment, but now she could pay rent without monthly panic. Her children did their homework at the table. Mom, is that the mean woman from the race? Her 12-year-old son asked. She was, Rosa replied carefully. But people can change. If they choose to. Did you forgive her? Rosa thought about it. I don't know yet. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means not letting my anger toward her control my life. And I have better things to do than carry around hatred. Her 9-year-old daughter looked up. Like what? Rosa smiled. Like making sure other children never lose their mothers or fathers in preventable workplace accidents. Like teaching you that values matter more than expensive cars. Like showing you that the quietest person in the room is sometimes the most powerful. A year after the race, Rosa was invited to speak at a national workplace safety conference. Huge stage. Audience of 2,000 people. Live broadcast to 50,000 online. She took the stage wearing a professional blazer, but she had brought something special. Keys to the 1995 Civic. This, she said, holding the keys up to the camera, is the most important object I own. Not because it's worth money. Because it taught me 3 lessons that changed my life. The first screen appeared behind her. A photo of the Civic before the rebuild, rusty, broken, seemingly worthless. First lesson, never judge potential by appearance. This car looked like junk. It was a treasure waiting to be discovered. People are the same. Woman cleaning your office? She may have a PhD. Man serving your coffee? He may be a businessman who lost everything and is starting over. Never assume you know someone's story based on the chapter you're seeing. Next screen. Photo of her working on the engine late at night, covered in grease. Second lesson, rebuilding is possible. 8 years ago, I lost everything. My career, my confidence, my sense of worth. I was broken in ways that went far beyond the financial. This car was a way to prove to myself that I could still create something. I could still fix something. I still mattered. If you're broken right now, financially, emotionally, spiritually, know that rebuilding is possible. One bolt at a time. One day at a time. Last screen. Photo of Civic crossing the finish line ahead of Mercedes. Third lesson, underestimating people based on appearances is the most costly mistake you can make. Victoria Hastings lost a $340 million company because she saw a uniform instead of an engineer. She saw an old car instead of years of work. She saw a black woman working in the labor class and assumed there was nothing more to see. Rosa paused, letting the silence weigh on the room. But here's the truth she learned too late. Consistency beats arrogance. Respect beats power. And the quietest person in the room, the person you ignore, the person you treat as invisible, the person you assume is insignificant, that person may be documenting your every move. They may be rebuilding an engine in their garage. They may be waiting for the perfect moment to show you that you were completely wrong. Deafening applause. Rosa waited for the silence to return. So here's my challenge to each of you, look around tomorrow. At work, on the street, at the supermarket. And ask yourself, how many people am I underestimating? How much potential am I missing because I judged a book by its cover? How many incredible stories am I ignoring because I decided someone wasn't worth my time? She held the keys up higher. This car taught me that real value doesn't come from price. It comes from purpose, from meaning, from refusing to accept that appearance defines essence. Rosa lowered her hand, looking directly at the cameras. And if there is one person watching this right now who feels invisible, who feels worthless, who feels like junk that no one wants, know this: you are not your appearance. You are not your circumstances. You are the sum total of every choice you made not to give up. Of every night you kept going when it would have been easier to stop. Of every moment you documented injustice when others would have ignored it. Tears ran down faces in the audience. Rosa felt her own tears coming, but she kept her voice steady. Victoria tried to humiliate me. She ended up giving me a platform. She tried to make me feel small. She made me realize how strong I was. She tried to prove that people like me don't matter. She proved exactly the opposite. She paused for a final moment. If this story has touched you, if you've ever been judged for the uniform you wear or the car you drive or the neighborhood you live in, don't let them define you. Document it. Rebuild. Wait for the right moment. And when that moment comes, show them exactly who you are. Not with anger. Not with vengeance. But with such irrefutable excellence that they have no choice but to recognize that they were completely wrong. The standing ovation lasted a full 5 minutes. If you were moved by this story, if you believe that dignity does not depend on a bank account and that respect should be a basic human right, subscribe to the channel. Because stories like Rosa's remind us that true victory does not come from destroying enemies. It comes from building something so strong that their opinion becomes irrelevant. 2 years after the race, Rosa's 1995 Civic was in a museum. Not a car museum. The Smithsonian's National Museum of American History, in an exhibition on common objects that changed conversations. The plaque next to it read, "This 1995 Honda Civic, rebuilt by engineer Rosa Washington, defeated a Mercedes-AMG GT in a race that went viral globally and catalyzed a national labor reform movement. It represents the power of never underestimating potential based on appearances." Rosa visited the exhibition with her children, now 12 and 9. They stopped in front of the car she had driven for 8 years. "It looks so small," her daughter said. "It is small," Rosa agreed. "But it taught huge lessons." "Do you miss it?" her son asked. Rosa looked at the car through the exhibition glass. She remembered every night in the garage. Every weekend installing parts. Every moment doubting whether it made a difference. "I don't miss the car," she replied honestly. "I feel gratitude for what it represented. Proof that rebuilding is possible. That value doesn't come from price. That underestimating someone based on appearances is always a mistake." She placed her hands on her children's shoulders. And more importantly, when someone tries to make you feel small, the answer is not to stay small. It is to remember how big you are. It is to document. It is to rebuild. It is to wait for the right moment. And it is to prove with excellence that no one can deny exactly who you are. "Like you did," her daughter said. "Like I did," Rosa confirmed. "And like you will do when it's your turn." As they left the museum, Rosa looked back one last time. Civic was dramatically lit, surrounded by objects that changed history. Next to it, Alexander Graham Bell's telephone. Above it, the original suffragette flag. Below it, the first Apple computer. And there among them, the car she had bought for $800 and rebuilt with grease-stained hands. Now a permanent part of American history. Not because it was the fastest or most expensive car, but because it proved, to millions of people, a lesson the world needed to learn. Never underestimate someone in uniform. Never assume that appearances tell the whole story. And never, ever forget that the quietest person in the room may be the most powerful of all. Because sometimes, the loudest roar doesn't come from the most expensive engine. It comes from a heart that refuses to be silenced.